Welcome to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, a program for and about women. Joyce Buford is a certified coach and motivational speaker who has a passion for helping women who need a second wind. She is the author of the Amazon bestseller, Effortless Happiness, How to Find Your Voice and Finally Ask for What You Really Want. She studied directly with her mentor, Jack Canfield, and is a fully certified coach in his program. Also, she has served as an assistant in his training programs. Through her study with many prestigious coaches and mentors, she has created a powerful program that has positively impacted thousands of people. On today's program, Joyce and her guests will help you to get your second wind. Now here's your host, Joyce Buford.
Good morning. How is everyone out there? Are you hanging in there with all of this COVID-19 still around us, still coming in on our space and invading our freedom and our safety? It's a strange time, isn't it? And we're all trying to figure out how to survive this very difficult time. Never before have we experienced something like this. And so we're kind of in unknown waters here. But now where we are in Texas, and I'm thinking in different states in the United States, for those that live outside of the United States, we're in a controlled re-entry into our daily routine outside of our homes. So the stay at home is still wanted by many people because we just don't know who to trust. We don't know if it's safe, and we probably will never be totally safe feeling until there is a vaccine for the virus, probably, which is months away from becoming a reality. But our leadership is not maintaining its original guidelines of quarantining people that have been exposed to COVID-19, and waiting for the decrease of cases. So it's kind of uncharted waters we are living in. Now, with the responsibility falling on the states, which is how it's ended up, each state is moving fast, but hopefully responsibly, in re-entering the workforce. I get it. It's a tough place for so many of us. We're actually being asked to choose between safety and financial security. And that is tough for so many people that are suffering. So the main thing that I want to leave you with today, if you are in the place where you have more freedom to choose, that you choose what is right for you. If you are like me, a single woman that's living alone, I don't have to depend on somebody else in my household to give me their opinions, nor to influence my decisions. I know for me, I've chosen to stay the safe route. I still wear all of the precautions. I still wear the mask. I still wear the gloves. I still wear the limited. I only go to the grocery store and maybe pick up food and maybe go to the post office. I'm still very limited. But the main thing here is that you do what is comfortable for you. Because if you do what is comfortable for somebody else in your household and not for you, if you're influenced by friends or family, you will increase your stress level to the point that you will compromise your immune system. Really. So I really want to maintain for you and give you permission to do what is comfortable for you. Don't be influenced by what takes place in the next couple weeks, but what makes you comfortable in living the lifestyle that you want to live. So, it's an ultimate difficult decision still. We each need to really research ourselves, make sure that we're comfortable, and then we can move forward with whatever we decide. There isn't a right wrong until you get COVID-19, and then it's kind of a risky thing. So anyway, I wish you well in making this decision as we continue to work our way through a very, very, very difficult life that we're living now. Sort of turning us to another part of our lives in the program today, our guest today works with the brain. And I am a big advocate of supporting our brains and helping our brains work for us. You know, it's become so popular over the last few years that we talk more and more and more about how our brain is influenced and affects our way of living. Marilyn Abrahamson is a speech-language pathologist and an Eamon Clinic certified brain health coach. Now, she's born with a passion for brain health and education. Marilyn has created preventative and innovative brain health and education programs designed to teach people how to optimize memory and thinking skills and stave off symptoms of age-related cognitive changes and dementia through modified lifestyle changes in choices and functional memory strategies. Now, Marilyn is currently focused her energy on her new program, Be Sharp and Stay Sharp, in which she incorporates training modules with both private and group coaching sessions to guide women to achieve their ultimate potential in their life and in their careers. So, Marilyn, I can hardly wait to get on this subject. You know, I love the brain. I love the brain.
Oh, hi, Joyce. I didn't think anybody loved the brain more than I did, but you never know. It is the most fascinating subject, really.
I have just become so aware of, I never until I got this age, of course I'm at the age where I see things changing, and because of those changes, I went, oops, what's happening here? Yeah. So there's a big thing that happens as we age. Talk about that to us. We already are aware of it, but what is it? Why is it happening to us?
Well, I can tell you those changes happen way before we feel them. But, you know, a lot of people, if they're really paying attention, will start to notice these changes happening maybe in their 40s. Some people notice them a little bit earlier than that, nothing serious. And, you know, those changes are normal. There are normal things that happen to our brains. And a lot of it has to do with how active we are, both intellectually as well as physically. It does have, you know, I'm not talking about genetic changes. I'm talking about the normal changes that happen to us. And interestingly, it turns out that a lot of it has to do with brain size.
Oh.
And yes, and for example, if you took a CAT scan of somebody's brain in their 20s and 30s, you'd find that the brain takes up most of the skull. There's very little space between the edge of the brain and the inside of the skull. But if you take the same person, take a CAT scan 20 or 30 years later, you're going to notice that space is a little bit bigger. And that's what it's all about. Now, this is actually very exciting, believe it or not. And the reason that that's exciting is because we can actually do some things that will keep our brain big and voluminous. And big and voluminous brain is what's going to correlate directly with how well we remember things, how much we're able to pay attention and focus, and how fast we can respond to things.
So I've always thought, and in my mind, I made this decision all by myself, that when I would forget a name, you know, I'd be trying to talk with somebody and I couldn't remember Sally Joe's name or I couldn't remember a location, I'd always sort of breathe and kind of give myself some space, thinking that little blood vessel that works that part of the brain was just so stressed. It had no blood in it. And so is that sort of thinking right? Or is that what really happens when we get in those situations where we can't remember names, we can't remember location names?
Well, think about this. Sometimes you hear a person's name, they introduce themselves to you, and 2 seconds later you can't remember it. Have you ever had that happen to you?
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of people think that this is a problem with memory, but it is absolutely not a problem with memory. It's a problem with attention. And, I don't want your listeners to take this the wrong way because this isn't coming from me, but basically
okay.
The problem
we
is
promise.
when people tell us their names, in many cases, we don't care enough to really pay attention when they're saying the name. Because what are we thinking about? We're thinking, oh, that's a nice haircut, or I wonder where she got that blouse, right? Or, boy, I should remember to put milk on my shopping list later. Meanwhile, they're introducing themselves and we're not listening.
Yes. Now, does that have anything to, I'm assuming you're talking about focus here, but if we tend to be sort of ADD, are these people more likely to have memory or focus issues?
Yeah. And, because they're more likely to have difficulty focusing, overall. There are strategies that people can do, and they're very simple strategies. I tell people that there are 2 things that you have to do to remember a name. The first thing you have to do is you have to consciously switch on your attention. And you can do that by saying something to yourself. So for me, if I see somebody, and by the way, this takes practice and time because you want it to become second nature. But if I see somebody coming toward me and their hand is out, like they're going to shake my hand, which people aren't going to really be doing anymore. But in the meantime, if someone's going to be introducing themselves to me, in my mind, I have made it a habit to say to myself, okay, what's the name?
Yeah.
And I tell my students, don't worry about what you say to yourself. Just let something come to you. People just say to themselves, okay, pay attention. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. But what it does is it switches on your attention like a light bulb, like a lamp. And any memory strategy that you do, really all it does is it forces you to pay attention. You cannot do a memory strategy unless you're paying attention. The second thing that you need to do to remember a name is to give it meaning. You have to make some sort of connection. Now, I was teaching this class a couple of years ago in a town, I live in New Jersey, in a town called Monroe Township. And I'm teaching this class, and I said, my name is Marilyn, and what kind of associations can we make with Marilyn? And somebody said, oh, you're Marilyn in Monroe, like that. Yeah. And people kind of chuckled. Now, what was interesting about the chuckle, it wasn't hysterical, but it was kind of cute and very catchy. And what that did was it created an emotion. Now, when I say emotion, it doesn't have to be a big emotion, but just some little emotion, which means that it has meaning to you. So the fact that it was kind of a chuckle meant that people got the joke, and that it had meaning. And now nobody in that class will forget my name strictly because we had that meaningful exchange about my name, Marilyn and Monroe. Ha ha. That was the meaning, the connection. So
I wonder if anybody would ever automatically just introduce themselves that way. Hi, I'm Marilyn, as in Marilyn Monroe.
That would be great. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I took a Dale Carnegie course because I've always been challenged by remembering names, even when I was younger. And I do have some ADD issues. And so I took the Dale Carnegie course, but I couldn't remember their involved process to remember the names. It was like I had to remember it. It was so, I don't know. It just didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't taken the Dale Carnegie course, but I can tell you that to remember names is a two-step process. You don't have to remember too much. Yes.
I think this had about 15 steps in it. That was probably the problem for me. But right. I like that. I think that would be a wonderful tool to help somebody take over that remembering the names. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So what is the age that you said 45 is when we start, starting recognizing some memory loss.
I think that it's different for everybody. I think that, not only does it depend on the person, it depends on, do they work for a living? Do they challenge themselves? And how much are they even paying attention to it? But the first thing I think that people will notice, most of the women that I speak with, actually men too, is processing speed slows down. In other words, getting the words out is a little bit harder. When you hear something, it may take a few extra seconds to totally process it. Sometimes we find that when we read, this is a combination of attention and processing speed, but when we read, we might have to read things a couple of times, to really get it. Yes. So the processing speed really is one of the first things we notice. People who really know me and my students know, because I tell this story, is when my kids were younger, I have two sons, and it was just me and them at the kitchen table. And, if you raise sons, you know that there comes a time when they get a little older, they don't have that much to talk about with their mother. And I really did want to engage them in conversation. So what we did was we would watch Jeopardy and play Jeopardy during dinner, just so that I could kind of engage with them. And I was pretty good at it, but I found over time that suddenly, even though I kind of knew the answers in my head, I couldn't get them out in time for the buzzer. And I would say to my kids, but I knew the answer. And they'd say, sure, Mom, you knew the answer. But I did.
Yes.
And that's when I realized that my processing speed was slowing down. I tell that story all the time. But it is so true. I mean, that was like a turning point for me when I realized that. Yeah. And that's, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are nodding their heads right now because it is such a common thing.
Yes. Yeah. So when that process of slowing down begins, what did you do to take on the challenge of to increase the function of the brain?
Well, initially, at that time, although, as a speech-language pathologist, I did have to know about the brain because I did work with patients with stroke and brain injuries and things like that. But I didn't really know the nuances of brain coaching, brain training. So at that time, I tried, I was working, I got a Lumosity subscription. I was doing lots of crossword puzzles and reading, and none of it was really I think those things were good for my brain. I don't think that it was bad, but it didn't really help. So, yes. It didn't. So nothing really helped until I started to realize, that even my job seemed like it was getting a little harder. And I was in my late 40s at that time, and really starting to panic a little bit because I didn't know what was going on, and I had this low-level anxiety because I felt like I had so much work and not enough time to do it. And it was the same job that I had done for 30 years at that point, so I didn't understand what was changing. And, that was a tough time. But what really, really changed things was I created a brain health program at the hospital where I was working just because that's what I was asked to do. And I had to study the brain and learn about the nuances of how to manage the changes. And what I discovered was that our brains change just like the rest of our bodies do. like our knees and our joints and our backs. But we don't have trouble. We don't have any difficulty compensating for those things, because if we get down on the floor to pick something up, we can put our hands on a table to support us as we get up, or to kind of pull ourselves up. We know how to compensate for the body, but we don't know how to compensate unless we're taught how. We don't know how to compensate for our changing brain, and we're trying to use it the same way we did when we were 25 years old. And of course, no wonder it doesn't work the same anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when I built this program, a lot of the women, I worked in a hospital with 5,000 employees, and of course I didn't even know, a tenth of those people, or I knew even less than that. But when this program came out and the employees found out about it, I started getting a lot of women knocking on my door who I hadn't met before, and they would stop me in the hallway, and I met a lot of coworkers. But what I learned was that this problem is real, was that this problem of women, mostly in their 50s, but certainly in their 40s, are experiencing changes that make them nervous. They wonder what's going on, especially if they have a family history of memory disorder in their family.
Yeah.
And we worked together, and, a lot of them were already considering quitting their jobs at that point. Mm-hmm. But I still get emails from them today. I worked with them just at lunch. We just did things at lunch and after work and things like that. And I talked to them and gave them strategies. And I get emails all the time from them. And this is, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. They're still working and they're still succeeding. And that's when I discovered my love of working with women in this demographic.
Why do you think that women are so, I would think the male brain versus the female brain is the same. Is it because of our environment, our working compared to I don't understand why. Well, I know I'm going to step out and say, I think women are more about asking for support and guidance when they find a problem that they don't like than the male is. And that I'm reflecting only on a woman will ask for directions when driving and feeling lost much quicker than a man will. So that's kind of where I came with that logic. But do you have more information on why a man handles memory loss differently? I would think they have the same memory loss.
They have similar memory loss. I think that one of the main reasons why women experience it so much more dramatically is because of the sudden loss of estrogen that happens around the time of menopause. And estrogen has a surprising amount of responsibility in the brain, particularly with regard to different aspects of our cognition, but particularly with regard to word retrieval and language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, just general memory and forgetfulness will be caused by that sudden drop of estrogen as well. But, there are other variables as well. There were men that came to me, but maybe 1/10 the amount of men. And, there is a machismo factor there.
Yes.
They don't want to be seen as weak. But, there's a mindset with women, not just that they're more likely to reach out for help, which is a wonderful thing for us. I think that that's a huge positive. But just in terms of how quickly we beat ourselves up, when things don't go well. So in other words, one of the first things that I deal with in my program, which is actually called BrainWorks Academy, in the program, the first thing we work on is mindset. Now, for example, I people say to me all the time, "Oh, I'm terrible with names," or "I can't remember anything," or things like that. And I teach them a little strategy, and they're amazed at how well their brains work. And so I say to them, so from now on, if you forget someone's name, which is going to happen because we're all human, right? I just tell them, just say, well, I forgot because I didn't do the strategy, not because, I'm horrible with names. I mean, we say things to ourselves that we wouldn't say to our worst enemies.
That's
but,
true.
But really, there's so much mindset that has to do with it. People function so much. They can function so much better than they think that they can, or that they currently are functioning. Mm-hmm. There's so much more potential if they just know how to tap it.
Yeah, I think we tend to be really hard on ourselves. And of course, anybody knows that with those words we say to ourselves are limiting beliefs mm-hmm. that just keep us stuck in the old pattern. Sure. So I love the way that you use that, the analogy of twisting it into a positive reinforcement. Yeah, that's really great.
It's really important to do.
Now, do you think that the loss of the reading skill that we used to have, we used to read so much more. Now we live in a world where we listen more than we read. And for those people I know, they are always pushing reading. And many leaders and coaches and leaders in business, they maintain a reading library of one book a month. This is pretty common with most of the people that I talk with. So mm-hmm. Is reading that important to us?
Yeah, reading is so important to us. And, a lot of us are losing that skill. Yeah. Frankly, I actually prefer reading something to listening to an audiobook. I really do. I thought maybe it was just a time thing, and I bought an app called Blinkist, which gives you a audio summary of books, and I still didn't like it. For me, reading is just preferable. It sort of takes me away, and, I can just shut my brain down and read a story. But reading and writing, that's why it's so important to journal.
Yes.
All of those things, we don't want to lose those neural pathways because, everything that we do, everything, not just, reading and walking and talking, but even breathing, everything that we do has neural pathways in the brain that are associated with it. And earlier in our call, when we first started talking, I was talking about brain size. We want to keep our brain big and voluminous. Mm-hmm. As we get older, many of us, not all of us, but many of us tend to do less. We don't feel like going to the book club anymore. We retire. Think about all of the neural pathways in your brain associated with your job.
Yeah. We're going to take Marilyn, I'm going to break in here. We're going to take a brief break for a commercial audience, and then we'll come back. I want to talk more about that size of the brain for sure. Okay. So we'll be back shortly.
Transformational coach, motivational speaker, and author Joyce Buford returns after this short break. Close your eyes and imagine living your life without limits. Where would you go? Who would you meet? What would you do? During an Uncover Your Hidden Genius session, you will discover what's keeping you from living your life with purpose, passion, and fulfillment of your potential. You'll get a clear vision of the steps you need to take to uncover your hidden genius so that you can live a life without limits. Sessions can be done over the phone, Skype, or in person. Find out more at www.joycebufordempowers.com or by calling 903-287-0747. Welcome back to this segment of Second Wind. Joyce Buford, the author of Effortless Happiness, continues in this segment to share insights that will help you live a life of greater purpose and filled with happiness. Now here's our host, author and coach, Joyce Buford.
Now we've been talking today about the brain. Marilyn Abrahamson has shared with us about her fascinating studies of the brain. And so, Marilyn, one thing that we talked about earlier, and I'm always thinking, well, as I'm aging, I'm putting on more weight, and there's always that struggle. But it seems so strange that our brain is working in the opposite direction and shrinking. So I'd like for us to talk a little bit more about that.
It's so important, Joyce. But what's even more important to know, because that sounds pretty hopeless, doesn't it?
Yes.
But what's more important to know is that we can stop that from happening.
Really?
There are ways to stop it, yes. So let me tell you. So the neural pathways that are associated with all of our skills, we were talking about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When we stop doing things, when we stop going places, when we stop learning new things, when we stop, skiing, anything that we stop doing as we age, the neural pathways that are associated with those skills begin to wither. If we play the piano and we stop doing it, fortunately, they do stay in there for quite a period of time, even if we're not using them. But they wither away and they take up no space. And when enough neural pathways wither, the brain does not have to stay that, same size in order to accommodate it. So what happens is it will shrink. And that's when we're going to see all of these changes taking place, these changes in memory and attention. Now, there are several things that we can do to make our brains basically grow again. We can do that.
Yeah.
The first thing, very important, is we need a chemical in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is BDNF. And there are things that cause us to release this chemical to help our brains grow new neural pathways. One is exercise. Physical exercise has been shown to cause a release in this chemical into the brain. The other thing is, I call it neurobics, but it's change of routine, keeping your brain switched on. So, for example, taking a different route to common places than you normally do. Changing your routine in the morning, using you've heard of this, using your opposite hand to brush your teeth or hold your utensils, things like that. Keeping your brain switched on. We play, in my house occasionally, we play neurobic ping pong. We switch hands to the opposite. And what's interesting is, when you first start doing these things, you're clumsy. When we play ping pong, the ball is flying everywhere. But within 10 or 15 minutes, you can see that you start to develop the skill. You make the connection in your brain. You got to keep doing it in order to create change. But there you have it. And when you see yourself improving in skills that were, you were very clumsy with initially, that you can actually see the neuroplastic changes in your brain taking place. And if you pay attention to that, it's actually quite fascinating, and you want to keep doing it more and more. But what's really important is that by doing these, by continuing to make all these connections, you are keeping your brain big and voluminous, and that's how we keep it functioning at its potential.
Wow, that's even a more exciting reason to exercise. I mean, really get out and walk. I mean, is just doing the walking, is that enough exercise to affect the size of the brain?
Yes. Now, from what I've read in the research, that exercise that gets your heart rate up, cardio, will affect this thing that we call neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change and adapt in response to new learning and new experiences, and your brain will continue to work well if you continue to do these things. So cardio is very important for that. And strength training is important as well for things like attention and some things that we call executive functions, like decision-making and organization and planning skills. So different types of exercise are going to affect your brain differently. But, most people who are really in, great shape are doing all of these different types of exercises. So that's really the key.
Right. Yeah. Well, I can this is so beneficial to me, Marilyn. I can see where I need to get out on do some walking and do some lifting and other things that I just haven't. I'm just not an exerciser. So I'm going to change, Marilyn.
That's great.
And I'm going to think of you every time I walk. I'm going to say, Marilyn, I'm doing this with your help.
Well, I'll tell you what. Call me and I'll walk here and we can talk on the phone and walk together.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I'll call you and we can talk. Now, have you heard of Jim Quick?
Oh, yes. He just wrote a book, which I actually just purchased.
Yes, I did too. He's just amazing with his books, and he's become quite a thing. He helps people remember scripts. I mean, he does all sorts of talented things, and has really built a successful career through his own path, where he was felt defective as a young person, and now he has sort of taken on and been successful in creating his brain, this work with the brain, which was a result of his growing up. So I actually tried one of the things that he was doing in that little mini series prior to selling his book. And he might have been on that same call. He actually did suggest we change hands to brush our teeth. And I tried it, and I am so with you. That is so awkward. I mean,
it is.
It was difficult. But so anyways, that's another source for listeners out there to get his book as well. But
there's also a book called Keep Your Brain Alive. By Lawrence Katz and Manning Rubin, and that is the book where the term neurobics, meaning switching things up, where that term actually originated from. And all of the neurobic, and in fact, you can even Google neurobics and so many ideas for what you can do to to kind of switch up the routine. The idea behind doing these things is to use neural pathways in the brain to complete a task that you normally wouldn't use it for. So, for example, if you're right-handed and you brush your teeth with your right hand, when you do it with your left hand, you're using neural pathways that are sort of neglected.
Yes.
And withering. So what you do is you wake those up, and so now you have more neural pathways that are lit up in your brain. The idea, you want your brain to light up like a Christmas tree, basically, and you want to use as much of it as you can, as often as you can. And listen, I love routines because they get me out really quickly in the morning, but routines get you out quickly. Why? Because you don't have to think when you're doing them, and that's not a good thing.
Yes. Now, spell that neurobics.
It's Neurobics. Neurobics.
Okay. All right. For those people out there that want to look it up. So tell me or share with my audience where they can go to find your work. In other words, you do have the Brain Work Academy. You do work with clients one-on-one and in group programs. And so where can they go to find your work, like your website?
I do have a website. It's www.marilynabrahamson.com.
And you might spell Abrahamson. Spell your last name, please.
It's Marilyn is Marylyn. Abrahamson is Abrahamson, and that's all one word, .com.
Okay.
And you can see everything I do there, and there's also a Contact Us form on there. And if you fill that in, I will respond to you.
Now, is that also where, I know you're offering for my listeners a freebie today. Is that also where they can find the freebie?
I think the freebie is on there. It's called the Clear Your Mind, Boost Your Productivity Toolkit. I'll actually have to check and see if it's on there. But I know I gave you the link to that as well. If it's not on there, I'm going to do that. I'll make sure that it's accessible as soon as we get off the podcast.
Oh, that would be wonderful. That way, I want people to go because your website is just crammed full of good information. It has on there where they can actually get a clarity session with you if somebody is saying, I want more Marilyn. I need Marilyn.
That's right.
So
that's right. Right. And that session is free.
Oh, awesome. So it's called a brain health coaching clarity call. And how long is it? It's 30 minutes or?
It's 30 to 45 minutes. And we dig kind of deep into what kind of experiences people are having and whether it's something that should spark concern, or whether it's just normal changes that we go through because, people they don't know and they're scared. Mm-hmm. They're afraid. And so it's good to have somebody to kind of bounce the ideas off of. And if it's a good fit and if it's something that I think I can help people with, then I offer help.
Yes. So you have all your background with pathology, which is speech and language pathology, where you spent how many years with that? 7 or 8?
I'm still practicing, actually. Yeah, I'm still practicing. So I think 1986, 35 years, something like that.
Oh my gosh.
I worked with people to improve their cognition. I worked with people who have had strokes and brain injuries and trying to get people's brains to come back from significant decline. Mm-hmm. Most of the women I work with now think they're declining, but really all they're doing is changing. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Yeah.
That is so interesting that you put it that way because changing doesn't seem as harsh as declining, does it? We're all changing. No. I mean, even with this virus, our lives have changed through this. It's always just a matter of reorganizing from the change. Now, you also did some work with Eamon clinics, which I have had the fortune of getting involved with them because of my own story. But how did you decide and why did you decide to do their you were certified through their coaching program, correct?
Yes. Initially, I took a course called the Neuroscience Academy because I really wanted to do a deep dive into the brain more than what I had been doing, the prior 30 years or the prior 25 years, however long ago that was. And it was amazing, that course, but I was just really hungry for knowledge. And I saw Dr. Eamon's course to become a certified brain health coach. And it was also different information, but incredible because, as you can imagine, the information and knowledge that you can gain about the brain is pretty much endless. There's always more to learn. And so it was a great experience becoming a certified brain health coach because what's really nice is that, especially now in this time when we're kind of working alone in isolation in rooms, in our homes, things like that, I have a community of other brain health coaches from the Eamon clinics that I can always, we bounce ideas off of each other and we talk to each other and we support each other, and it's very nice. Yeah. It's really a nice thing to have.
You alluded earlier to firing the brain up. One of the things that Dr. Eamon does at his clinics is, and he does have a big service for the brain, the damaged brain, those that from illness or accidents or many other causes.
Yeah.
Is that right? And so he also has this ability to put a liquid, and you probably could be more specific than I, but he can actually take pictures of your brain and see where you stand. I have some dementia and Alzheimer's in my family, and so it was very important to me to go and get that testing. And so it was very interesting, my experience there, and I walked away. When we find answers, we're just not as scared as we were.
Right.
We haven't really in our minds built up this horrendous picture of gloom and doom. And so it was kind of really beneficial for me to go and experience Dr. Eamon's process. So, and he's got those clinics all over the United States. I think they originate in California, but, so.
I know there's one here in New York as well. Dr. Eamon mentioned in his course that psychiatry, he's a psychiatrist, that it's the only medical profession where we don't look inside. Physicians have x-rays and gastroenterologists do endoscopies and other things like that. But psychiatrists don't. And it was very important to him because he knew that there were many, many reasons for people to be symptomatic. And without looking inside, basically what's happening is we're just treating everybody the same way, regardless of why it's happening. And I happen to agree with him there. I think that that's very important to know why. And he discovered through the spectrograph studies that there are something like 7 different types of ADD. And
really?
Because of that, he treats them differently. Different areas of the brain light up. He even did research on people's brains in prison and noticed a lot of similarities between the people that, murdered people, certain areas of the brain lighting up. So it is really, really important that we continue to study the brain. It's not only fascinating, but the brain is everything. Without it, we're, what are we? So we have to take care of it. And because we don't have, it's not like where your brain complains all that much, so it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We don't consider it when we think about what kind of healthy things to do, what kind of healthy lifestyle choices to choose, because it's not a complainer. And we need to remember that it's there and make lifestyle choices that support it.
Yeah. What would you say? This just popped in my little mind, and I want to know, would you say that the brain is one of it's the brain, the heart? What are the important parts of our human body that we must have functioning well to keep us healthy?
Well, there is a saying that says what's good for your heart is good for your brain.
They're connected.
And, think about diet and exercise and things like that. And there's also a huge, more than we've ever, we're learning now every day that more than ever before, there is a huge connection between the gut and the brain.
Yes, I hear that. Yes.
So it absolutely is. We are one person. We're all connected. So that's why it's so important that we consider our brain just as, as much as we consider our heart and our stomachs and our, the rest of our bodies. It is all connected. It's all one thing. But the brain is what makes us who we are. It's what, it's we make choices and we, it's our personalities and it's what keeps us social. It's everything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So as a social person, does she have more active brain than a person that is a recluse?
Yeah, I would say so, because socialization is so much more important to the brain. It is such a workout for the brain. If you think about it, a person goes to a party and they're waiting for someone they know to show up. But in the meantime, they're standing there by themselves. So what do they have to do? They have to make conversation with people they don't know. They have to think about questions. They have to stand there and listen. But also in the back office of the brain, when that's happening, you're thinking about things like, okay, how much eye contact should I make? How far apart is appropriate? You know, the personal space thing. Some people don't have a good sense of that. You know, all of this stuff. And even if you're with people that you know, Joyce, someone may say, oh, remember that vacation we took 10 years ago? And you have to remember it. Or they tell a joke and you have to get it. You know, all of those things that happen during socialization. That's why socialization can be exhausting. And that's why people have social anxiety, because it's hard. And not everybody has a huge talent for it. You know, some people are very magnetic and other people have a harder time with it.
Yeah.
But
well, let me tell you, I've suffered greatly from COVID-19 because it's kept me inside.
Yeah. Well, that's another reason why it's been so devastating too, particularly, you know, I know like my own mother is 92 and living alone, and it's been completely devastating for them.
Yes. Yeah. For our older citizens, for sure. Yeah. So, all right, Marilyn, I want to make sure that my listeners can get to your website. So can we tell them one more time how to find you so they can take advantage of your Clarity coaching call and just get some more information? So what would that be?
It's www.marilynabrahamson.com, and I'm going to spell that for you. MarilynAbrahamson. MarilynAbrahamson.com.
Okay. And the freebie that you have offered us today, what is that again?
Oh, that's the Clear Your Mind, Boost Your Productivity Toolkit. And basically, the premise behind that is when you're overwhelmed, when you feel like you've got a huge amount of things to do, your mind is completely cluttered. You don't even know where to start, right? So basically what it teaches you how to do is how to almost like empty your brain onto this form, organize it, and then sort of prioritize everything that you have to do so that you can get everything done.
I like that.
Yeah,
I'm going to go get that. Because sometimes I feel terribly overwhelmed.
Yes. And what's nice about it is it's low tech.
It's what?
It's low tech. Low technology. It's paper.
Oh, God.
Paper and pencil.
Well, I hear so many of my women friends complain about the technology world, and it frustrates. I mean, it's part of the world. Being willing to open technology, to explore it, to do something and not be afraid of it, really opens up a whole world out there. And with COVID coming in and so many of our programs coming by some of the processes on the computer, we're going to see that the computer is really going to be a major part of our life, even more than it was 2 months ago, for so many other people, for teaching tools, for, I can even go to a museum through the computer and visit countries and do all this other stuff. So I would think that we need the tools that you have to give us to help us face that change that we want to be part of. We really do want to be part of it. We don't want to be left behind.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree.
So I really encourage, and I know that you may have people that I know they come and they say, I just can't do the technology. It's just too difficult for me. But it's not.
No, in fact, I have a Facebook group a closed private Facebook group that is free. And I do these Wednesday, I call them brain fog breakthrough sessions.
Yes.
And I do them on Wednesdays. Now, this Wednesday, tomorrow, right? That's tomorrow. I'm doing one on how the changes that we are experiencing can affect our confidence. Uh-huh. But next Wednesday, I'm going to be interviewing someone. She's called an implementation coach, and she's going to teach us how to make technology our friend.
Now, how do they go there? Just what is the Facebook group?
The Facebook group is called Reclaim Your Edge for women age 40 plus who want to be sharp and stay sharp.
Cool.
I think if they look up Reclaim Your Edge, there's a man's one I discovered. I didn't know about that. There's a man's Reclaim Your Edge, but this one is for women, right? Reclaim Your Edge for women age 40 plus who want to be sharp and stay sharp.
Cool. Well, Marilyn, we have come to the end of this very, very interesting hour. I thank you so much for being on my show today and sharing your wisdom.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it, Joyce.
Yes, yes. We have lots to share. So I want them to go to your website to find that out, to get their session with you if they feel they want to know more, and to just start brushing your teeth with your left hand. For sure.
Right. That's the first thing you can do.
And walk. I'm going to be calling you when I'm walking. So.
Absolutely. We'll walk together.
Oh, cool. So thank you. I appreciate very much that you came on the show today and that you're willing to share all your wisdom with my audience. I know a lot of people learn.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. So until next week, I say change your habits, brush your teeth with your left hand, and just see how difficult that is. But just think it's changing your brain. And it's causing new brain neural pathways to be developed that have gone dormant. So exercise is also the next thing. Anyway, we've got some things that you can go out and take action on. So please remember that while you're taking that action, you're growing your brain. And then you'll remember to be back with us next week to hear our program again and to hear someone new sharing her wisdom with you. Please go out, please stay safe, and please remember that it's your decision how you face your life. Thank you for being here today.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.